Hi guys, welcome back to TKT. I'm your host, Olivia, and today we're going to be talking about a huge problem going on in not only the United States, but the entire world. Every week I put out a poll on my Instagram at Olivia Carter. Go follow me on Instagram. I always put my podcast on there, and I always put polls for you guys. And I put a poll on my Instagram of what podcast I should do for this week. I put 3 options, so I always have different options. Last week, we talked about the climate change, and that was a great podcast. I think you guys should all go watch that one. There's plenty of podcasts on my channel, The Known Truth, TKT, but I put up 3 options on my Instagram story. America's chemicals, just talking about the chemicals that America allows in here. And I have doctors contributing to the nation's drug addiction and the election. We all know the election is on November 5th, and so everyone's kind of been in tune with that election. So I know a lot of people would love to talk about that. But by far, the doctors contributing to the nation's drug addiction podcast won with 100% poll, because a lot of people want to know the insides of doctors prescribing. Because doctors are there to prescribe, and doctors are there to diagnose and prescribe. But do they really know how much they're prescribing? Do they really know the addictions they are causing? So doctors contributing to the nation's drug addiction won by far. So I had you guys share some experiences you've had with overprescription, but and then I have my own experience that I'm going to share with you guys about not overprescribing, but the time that I was prescribed Adderall, and it was so easy for me to get that Adderall that why not? It could be easy for anyone. And somebody could go in that doctor's office and just lie and just get these drugs and either give them out for money or take them for themselves to be addicted to. So, first we're going to talk about overprescription and kind of what that means. Overprescription occurs when a patient is given more medicine than medically necessary, or when a medicine is not appropriate for the patient. So sometimes doctors are on work overload and they kind of hear you coming in a lot, and you come in with the same problem every single time. So doctors are there to diagnose you and then prescribe. So honestly, most things can be fixed like naturally. Natural ways of exercise, diet, all of these things, but doctors are there to diagnose and prescribe. So sometimes somebody might come in and they might think that they have really bad anxiety, like super bad anxiety, but they haven't done any of the other steps before getting diagnosed with any of the anxiety medicines. So they come in there and they've had anxiety for a little bit and they haven't done any of the natural remedies. So they come in there and the doctor's like, okay, I hear you out. And the doctor prescribes them with anxiety medication. And then they become addicted and they live off of that anxiety medication. What people don't realize is you're not supposed to take medicine every single day. You're not supposed to be on anxiety medicine for the rest of your life. Yes, anxiety is something that a lot of people have in this day and age, but you're not supposed to live off of that. You're not supposed to rely on those medicines because those medicines are not good for your body. The doctors have a lack of medical training, so they don't even know what they are diagnosing and prescribing to us and putting into our bodies. Because the pharmaceutical companies come in there, pharmaceutical companies come into the hospital, and I've seen this firsthand. Pharmaceutical sales reps are always very pretty, put together. They have a room in the hospital that all the doctors are invited to when they have a new medicine and they provide food, they provide drinks, they provide everything like that. And they make it look cute, make it look pretty, and they are very persuasive. So what they do is they come out with a new drug, whether that be for anxiety, whether that be painkillers, whether that be for ADHD, etc. So let's say they come in with a new painkiller and it's stronger than an opioid, but you don't have to take as much as you would when you take those opioids, when you have a surgery or something like that. And so they come in, they persuade you to get this, they persuade you to buy this drug from them. And they are so persuasive and they cater food, they bring in all of this stuff. And so you're like, okay, and it sounds good. Like a painkiller that you don't have to take a lot of them, but it will do the works, you know? So, they come in and they persuade you, and then eventually those doctors will buy the drug. When a doctor buys a drug, they eventually have to prescribe it to receive money off of that drug that they bought from the pharmaceutical sales companies and the pharmaceutical sales reps and the whole pharmaceutical sales team, because those pharmaceutical sales teams make billions and billions of dollars off of doctors prescribing medication from a diagnosis. So when that doctor has that medication and that pharmaceutical sales rep was very persuasive and they felt like that the pharmaceutical sales reps were doing their job and had a lot to say, the doctors will eventually prescribe it so they can earn money off of that drug, off of prescribing that drug. And so it's just a constant cycle of diagnosing and prescribing, diagnosing and prescribing. The doctors at this point don't even have awareness of what they are prescribing. They only know what those pharmaceutical sales reps are coming in and doing. And what I talked about, so one time there was this pharmaceutical sales company, and the pharmaceutical sales reps with the most sales to the most hospitals and doctors had something waiting for them at the end of the rainbow, which is gold. If they sold this drug, they would get a prize at the end of the rainbow, basically saying whoever persuaded these doctors the most to sell this drug, they would get something in return. So it's not even about the pharmaceutical sales reps caring about the people. Nobody cares about the people anymore. And that's what people have to see. These drugs are addictive for a reason. They want you to be addicted to these drugs because they want you to keep coming back. They want you to keep purchasing their product because it keeps them in business. And the pharmaceutical sales business is a huge business in our nation, and it's contributing to the nation's drug addiction. So we're going to talk about two of my viewers. I'm not going to say their name because obviously they don't want me to give out their personal information, but they told me, they DM'd me on Instagram with a story about when they were overprescribed and when they were prescribed with something they really didn't need, and when the doctors kind of didn't see the signs they didn't really pay attention to the signs. So let's get into my first person's DM. This is what he said. Okay, so let's get into it. He talks about he was a graduate student juggling the demands of coursework and a part-time job. The pressure was intense, and I find myself struggling to keep up. After months of sleepless nights and rising anxiety, I decided to seek help. My doctor, a kind man but hurried man, you know, doctors are always on the go. They're work overloaded, so they are kind of hurried. And you know, the doctor will you guys have been to a doctor's office. You know the doctors will be in there for like 5 minutes. They'll be like, oh, okay, so you got this. You got strep. You got this. I will prescribe you some amoxicillin, you know? So doctors are there to diagnose and prescribe. That's kind of what they do. Ongoing and ongoing. These doctors have become so obsessed with the money and the work overload and diagnosing and prescribing that they're not paying attention to the warning signs of anything. They are not caring for these patients. So, a kind but hurried man listened to my concerns and after a brief examination prescribed me Adderall. It'll help you focus, he said. At first, it worked wonders. I felt energized. My mind was sharp. I was able to tackle my studies. I was amazed by how much I could accomplish in a single day. But as the weeks went by, I found myself needing more. The initial dose wasn't enough anymore. I craved that rush of clarity and productivity. During my follow-up appointments, I didn't admit my growing dependency. Instead, I exaggerated my struggles, convinced that I needed higher doses to stay afloat. My doctor, trusting my self-reporting, increased my prescription. I felt like I was on top of the world, racing through assignments and acing exams, but it came at a cost. My days blurred together in overstimulation. My nights were plagued by insomnia and anxiety. And I can really relate back to this because I have a story also of when I was prescribed ADHD medication. I was able to get that medication very easily. I just went to the doctor and I told them my symptoms. I told them I couldn't focus. I told them I was crazy. I told them I was forgetful, and which I am. I really do think I have ADHD, but honestly, I haven't taken my Adderall in so long and I'm able to still do school. I just use natural remedies, you know? Like, you don't always need that prescribed medication because living off Adderall is not good. When I lived off Adderall in high school, I was super skinny. I craved taking my Adderall every morning because I would take 25 milligrams and I felt like I was on top of the world, just like what he said. And I was kind of growing a dependency to that Adderall, you know? Like, after a couple months of taking Adderall, you don't really feel it anymore, you know? You need more, and that's with any type of drug. So these drugs are given out by our doctors, prescribed by our doctors, but don't even realize how harmful these drugs can really be. Living off of such a harmful drug is not okay. Like, you're not supposed to take Adderall every single day, and after a while, you need more because you grow a dependency to it, just like him. So going back to what he said, soon I found myself in a cycle of highs and lows. I'd start each day with optimism fueled by the pills, but as the effects wore off, I would crash, exhausted, irritable, desperate for another dose. I began a withdrawal from friends and family, too ashamed to admit how spiraled out of control my life had become. And that is so true. I'm about to cry because I felt like that too. Like, I felt so lost my whole life. And then because I was always like the crazy kid, I was always the kid that like forgot everything. I never did good on anything because I was literally so crazy because I had such bad ADHD. And then once I found this medication, like, I felt normal and like I craved it because, like, I was like, if I don't take my Adderall, like, people are going to be annoyed with me today and I'm going to talk too much and things are just going to not go good. I'm not going to do good on my schoolwork. And so I did find myself in the cycle of highs and lows, just like this guy. And it really got to me because I loved working at my daycare. But I became exhausted and irritable by 3 p.m. and I just wanted another dose of Adderall because that Adderall kept me talking, it kept me going, it kept me alive. And once that Adderall wore off, I was dependent on it and I needed more. But I was so irritable. I didn't want to talk to anyone. I quit my job. I didn't want to interact with my students as I usually would. It was just not good. And now I see that, and now I don't take my Adderall. I have became not dependent to it, and I'm able to still live a focused but healthy, balanced life, and I'm still crazy. But it's just crazy how these doctors can go out there and prescribe this medication to people, and people don't even know, like, how dependent you can get on it. And I don't even know if doctors know that, because they just diagnose and prescribe, and that is the problem in America today, all over the nation, just diagnosing and prescribing. But going back, he said, I sat at my desk surrounded by empty coffee cups and scattered papers, feeling utterly drained. My heart raced, my hands trembled. The once clear line began between productivity and chaos had blurred, and I realized I was in too deep. I had become a prisoner to the very medication that I was supposed to set me free. He became a prisoner to this medication that he trusted his doctor to provide him with a medication that would help him. And he just became so dependent on this medication. And I really don't think doctors understand the severity that this medication does to you. Doctors have such a lack of medical training. They don't know the drugs that they are providing. And he said that he made the decision to call the doctor and confess everything. He was understanding, and he had a long journey back to balance. He slowly weakened off the medication and had to confront the chaos I had created in my life. So he said, looking back, I learned the importance of advocating for my health and being honest about my struggles. My experience taught me that sometimes the path to recovery is just as important as the destination, and that true focus and clarity come from within. So he realized that he did not need to go on medication to feel focused, have a healthy lifestyle balance, and that's kind of like me too. I thought medication would cure everything, but I really just created a dependency on this medication that was a stimulant that is not even good for you to take on a daily basis, and that if you take over time, you need more and more and more because your body becomes so used to it. And so that's what doctors don't understand. They're so quick to diagnose and prescribe. All right, guys, so that was the first person on my Instagram story that he shared. Thank you so much for sharing that. Honestly, that was very touching, and it literally had me a little bit in tears. Not in tears, but just tearing up, because like I related to this story so much, and it's true. Like, doctors don't treat you as humans. They treat you as diagnosed and prescribed patients. And this is the world problem. This is why doctors are contributing to the nation's drug addiction, because these patients are getting so addicted to these addictive drugs, and the doctors just keep prescribing because it keeps them in business from the pharmaceutical sales companies. And there's a blur. You don't even know the line between the doctors and the hospitals and the pharmaceutical sales companies, because they've came together and they are creating this big nation for themselves, $1 billion worth, while we're under and below them as just patients to them, not even real people. And with that being said, we're going to talk about a Nassau doctor sentenced to up to 15 years in prison for overprescription of opioids that led to 5 deaths. Dr. George Blatty. Dr. George Blatty ignored repeated warning signs and prescribed massive quantities of opioids and other drugs that killed 5 patients in 2016 to 2018. That is 2 years that you killed 5 patients. The system failed us. The system has failed us. Pleaded guilty to 5 counts of manslaughter, prescribed massive quantities of dangerous drugs to victims exhibiting clear signs of addictions and other health emergencies. 5 patients overdosed. And I remember talking about this with my friends one time about how this Nassau doctor prescribed him, and this is what happened. We're going to talk about Michael Keisner. Michael was one of George Blatty's patients, and he experienced some very crazy signs. So, Michael Keisner began seeing Blotty in 2013. Keisner was treated by Blotty with opioids for less than 6 months and was provided with more than 1,000 pills during that time. He was hospitalized for an overdose on October 29th, 2016, days after seeing Blotty, and prescribed morphine and clonazepam. He died on November 17th, 2016, just 2 days after seeing Blotty. So, Dr. George Blotty ignored warning signs and prescribed him with more than 1,000 pills. As a doctor, who does that? 1,000 pills. Think about how many pills are in your little strep throat amoxicillin pills. That's a lot of pills. Imagine prescribing 1,000 pills of morphine and clonazepam. That is an opioid that is so strong that if mixed together, will kill you. And this doctor was just prescribing everywhere. And I also read in an article where Dr. George Blotty was prescribing patients in and out of the doctor's office. Doctor's offices are meant to prescribe. That is where you prescribe, not in your car, not at your house. And Dr. Blotty was just doing that. He was meeting up with patients outside of the doctor's office, in his car, at his house, and prescribing these addictive opioid drugs to his patients. That if with a slight bit of extra boost of Tylenol would have made them feel better. But he prescribed them with morphine and all of these addictive drugs that were very bad for you. So the healthcare system failed Keisner. Keisner trusted Dr. Blotty and he failed him. Overprescribed him with drugs he probably did not need and gave him 2 drugs that if combined would be fatal, ending in a result of one of his patients dying. This was only one of his patients out of the 5. This happened with so many patients. These families are continuing to fight for justice, and we need to do the same. We need to monitor these doctors that are able to prescribe such harsh drugs, and they really need to pay attention to the warning signs their patients are giving. And you should not go, if you're prescribing your patient with opioids and addictive drugs, you should not go even 1 month without seeing them. Blotty went 6 months without seeing his patients and ignored warning signs when he saw them and prescribed them with 1,000 pills. That is crazy to me how that even is okay. And nobody was monitoring him. The healthcare system has really failed us. And they also investigated, and it showed that patients addicted to opioids requested controlled medications, and he prescribed thousands of pills, oxycodone, morphine, donazam, with no medical history or exam. In some cases, he prescribed opioid painkillers to patients requested he had never even met. He had never even looked these patients in the face, saw what they looked like, and he prescribed them with this medication. And someone came to him with neck pain, and he prescribed them with 35 prescriptions over 6 months, 4,000 pills, and he died on oxycodone and intoxication. That is just crazy to me, how nobody realized what this man was doing, and how none of his patients even realized that this is not okay, which is not the patient's fault. The doctor is supposed to be trusted, a trusted healthcare provider, and the doctor failed. The healthcare system has failed us so much that you can't even see the line between the pharmaceutical sales companies and the doctors. The line has blurred, and you don't even know who's on your side anymore. So I am sitting here right now, and I want you guys to advocate for yourself. If you feel like you are being overprescribed, or you're being prescribed something that you're not even needed, you don't even need that, advocate for yourself. If you're feeling that dependency on that Adderall medication, that ADHD medication, that anxiety medication, advocate for yourself, because you don't want to end up in a situation where you mix 2 drugs and it is fatal towards you. You don't want to be in a situation where the healthcare system fails you. And I know that's sad because we're supposed to trust our healthcare systems, but at this point, the healthcare systems really only care about the money, because if there's probably a cure to everything out there. There's probably a cure to cancer. But you know what? Cancer and all this other stuff, anxiety, ADHD, all of this stuff brings in so much money for these doctors and the pharmaceutical companies that they don't even care. They just want doctors to diagnose and prescribe because that brings in the money. And as patients, this is really sad that it has to be like this, but make sure to advocate for yourself and do your part. With that being said, this is kind of long, so we're going to wrap it up. And thank you guys so much for listening. Be sure to listen to next week's episode. It is a combined episode with one of our trusted doctors, and we're going to be talking a little bit more about doctors contributing to the nation's drug addiction. Thank you so much for listening to TKT, The Known Truth. My name is your host, Olivia Carter, and I will see you next week. Bye-bye.